When the Portland Trail Blazers selected Yang Hansen with the 16th pick, the world was left stunned. On paper, it was a massive reach for a 7'1" center from China who most analysts had pegged as a mid-second round talent at best. The story everyone saw was that of an underdog, a diamond in the rough who had earned his spot through sheer hard work. What if the most stunning pick of the 2025 NBA draft had nothing to do with basketball and everything to do with a multi-billion-dollar business deal? But that's not the real story, not even close. The truth is far more complex, buried beneath layers of secret workouts, backroom conversations, and a high-stakes financial gamble that could redefine the future of an entire franchise. This wasn't just a draft pick, it was a calculated move in a game played with billions of dollars on the line. Behind Yang Hansen's shocking rise lies a hidden narrative of money, power, and ambition that the league doesn't want you to know. And in this video, we're exposing it all piece by shocking piece. The clock was ticking. On draft night, the energy in the Barclays Center was electric, a volatile mix of hope and anxiety. Fans and analysts alike were glued to their seats, convinced they knew how the lottery picks would unfold. The script seemed written. But when the 16th pick came around, the Portland Trail Blazers did something no one saw coming. With a room full of more predictable, NCAA-proven talent still on the board, Commissioner Adam Silver walked to the podium and announced a name that sent a ripple of confusion through the arena. With the 16th pick in the 2025 NBA draft, the Portland Trail Blazers select Yang Hansen. For a moment, there was a stunned silence, followed by a wave of frantic whispers. Who? Hansen was a relative unknown, a 7'1" prospect out of the Chinese Basketball Association who was, by all accounts, a second-round project. Every major mock draft had him pegged to go somewhere in the 40s, maybe late 30s if a team was feeling adventurous. To take him at 16 felt like a colossal error, a misclick in the front office. The broadcast analysts were visibly baffled, scrambling through their notes to offer some kind of justification for a pick that defied all logic. They talked about his potential, his size, his passing, but their words were hollow, failing to mask the shared sense of shock. But the real story wasn't in the confused faces of the analysts or the murmurs in the crowd. It was in the chilling silence of one specific draft room. As the cameras cut to the Minnesota Timberwolves, who held the very next pick at number 17, the atmosphere was starkly different. There was no applause, no polite clapping for the young man whose dream had just come true. Instead, the faces of the Timberwolves' front office were grim, their expressions frozen. It was a brief, almost imperceptible moment, but it spoke volumes. In the world of the NBA draft, where professional courtesy is the norm, their refusal to clap was a deafening statement. This wasn't disappointment. It was the cold, hard look of a team that had just been robbed in broad daylight. They knew something the public didn't. They had seen Hansen, worked him out, and were ready to pull the trigger themselves. The Blazers hadn't just made a risky pick, they had executed a perfectly timed heist, snatching a player they knew their rivals desperately wanted. The silence from the Timberwolves table was confirmation. Hansen wasn't a reach. He was a target. And Portland had just beaten them to the punch, leaving Minnesota to stare at the draft board, their secret plan exposed and their prize now in the hands of another team. The heist was complete, and the rest of the league was only beginning to understand what had just happened. The clock was ticking. On draft night, the air in the Barclays Center crackles with a unique energy, a mix of nervous anticipation and corporate espionage. For weeks, analysts had mapped out every possible scenario, shuffling names on their big boards until the first round seemed all but a formality. The top prospects went as expected. Each pick met with a polite smattering of applause and knowing nods from the experts. When the Portland Trail Blazers went on the clock with the 16th pick, acquired via a trade, no one expected the night to take a sharp, unscripted turn. It was a pick most viewers saw as a chance to grab a solid role player, a safe bet to bolster their young roster. Then the commissioner stepped up to the podium. The arena quieted. With the 16th pick in the 2025 NBA draft, he announced, the Portland Trail Blazers select Yang Hansen. A wave of collective confusion washed over the room. For a moment, there was near silence, broken only by the frantic whispers of reporters and the shuffling of papers. Yang Hansen? The 7'1" center from the Chinese Basketball Association. Every major mock draft had him pegged as a late first-rounder at the absolute best, with most projecting him to fall deep into the second round. He wasn't even in the green room. He was, as reports later confirmed, in the stands eating fried chicken, so sure was he that his name wouldn't be called for at least another hour. This wasn't just a surprise, it was a seismic shock. On ESPN's broadcast, analysts were visibly stunned, fumbling through their notes to find information on a player they had barely scouted for this slot. It felt like a mistake, a rookie GM making an overly ambitious reach that would be ridiculed for years. But then the broadcast director made a crucial, revealing decision. The camera cut away from the celebrating Blazers table and panned over to another team's war room. It was the Minnesota Timberwolves, who held the very next pick at number 17. What the camera captured was far more telling than any expert analysis. While every other team in the league offered polite applause for the selection, the Timberwolves' room was a frozen picture of defeat. There were no claps, no smiles, just a collection of stony-faced executives staring blankly at the screen, their hands clasped on the table. Grainy footage that surfaced online later showed it even more clearly. A room full of people who looked like they had just been robbed in broad daylight. Their silence was deafening. It was the unmistakable look of a team whose entire draft strategy had just been blown to pieces. They knew something the public didn't. This wasn't a reach by Portland. It was a calculated heist. The Timberwolves' raw, unfiltered disappointment was the first crack in the official story, a clue that Yang Hansen was far from the unknown prospect everyone thought he was. They had been outmaneuvered, sniped just one pick before they could pull the trigger themselves. And as the world would soon discover, Minnesota wasn't the only team left staring at their now useless draft board with disbelief. They were just the first victims in a secret war for the NBA's next international prize. That frozen image of the Timberwolves' war room was just the tip of the iceberg. Their silent frustration wasn't an isolated event. It was simply the first public glimpse of a fiercely competitive secret war that had been raging behind the scenes for weeks. While the media and fans were debating the merits of the top 10 prospects, a completely different narrative was unfolding in the closed-door sessions and encrypted emails of NBA front offices. The truth is, Portland wasn't the only team that saw immense value in Yang Hansen. They were just the only team bold enough to pull the trigger before the secret got out. For weeks leading up to the draft, Hansen had been on a clandestine tour, working out for a select group of teams who were all picking in the late teens and early 20s. This wasn't a public showcase. It was a series of intense private evaluations designed to see if the hype was real. The list of suitors was a quiet drumbeat of rivals: the Brooklyn Nets, the Utah Jazz, the Atlanta Hawks, and of course the Timberwolves. All 5 of these teams, including the Blazers, held a first-round pick between 16 and 23, creating a tense, high-stakes game of chicken. Each one was hoping the others would blink, allowing Hansen to fall right into their laps. But no team was more infatuated, more clearly obsessed than the Atlanta Hawks. Armed with the 23rd pick, the Hawks front office didn't just interview Hansen once. They brought him in for 3 separate, in-depth conversations. In the world of pre-draft scouting, 1 interview is standard due diligence. 3 is a declaration of intent. They picked apart his film, they grilled him on his basketball IQ, and they were reportedly blown away by his maturity and understanding of the game. The Hawks fan base was all but convinced they were getting him. A star from China seemed like the perfect addition. The team's insiders were confident that even at 23, it was their secret to keep. They believed no one else would dare to make such a reach. They were wrong. What the Hawks saw, the Nets and the Jazz saw too. With each workout, Hansen's secret stock rose. He wasn't just a 7'1" project. Scouts raved about his work ethic, his surprisingly nimble footwork, and a court vision that simply couldn't be taught. He wasn't just acing the drills, he was crushing the interviews, displaying a quiet confidence that impressed hardened executives. The whispers grew louder with each passing day. This kid was the real deal. Portland's front office, led by a GM known for trusting his gut, wasn't operating in a vacuum. They heard the same whispers. They knew they couldn't wait. Their pick at 16 wasn't a reach. It was a preemptive strike. They jumped the line because they had intelligence that a bidding war was about to erupt, and they decided to end it before it even began. So what exactly did these teams see in those closed-door sessions that the rest of the world had missed? So what was this secret that had half a dozen NBA front offices ready to risk a first-round pick on a relative unknown? The answer wasn't just about raw talent. It was about a revolutionary shift in the NBA, a new blueprint for building a championship contender. To understand why Yang Hansen became so coveted, you have to understand that the league had fallen in love with a new archetype, the playmaking big man. For years after the Shaq era, the traditional back-to-the-basket center was a dying breed. The game became dominated by guards and athletic wings who could shoot the 3 and run the floor. Big men were often relegated to being screen setters and rebounders. A true center who could dominate the game and bend it to his will seemed like a relic of the past. Then, a quiet revolution started, led by a Serbian genius named Nikola Jokic. He wasn't the fastest or the most athletic, but he saw the game like a grandmaster playing chess. From the high post, he became the most dangerous offensive weapon in the league, a 7-foot point guard who could dissect defenses with surgical passing. He didn't just score, he elevated every single player around him. He turned role players into deadly cutters and average shooters into legitimate threats. The Denver Nuggets built their entire system around this radical idea, and it led them to an NBA championship. Suddenly, the playmaking center wasn't just a novelty. It was the new gold standard, the holy grail of modern offense. This Jokic blueprint became the most sought-after commodity in the league. Teams saw how players like Domantas Sabonis and Alperen Şengün, who fit a similar mold, became all-star caliber players. They were offensive hubs, big men with the vision of a guard and the size to create mismatches all over the floor. The value of a center who could pass from the top of the key skyrocketed as front offices realized that this was the ultimate cheat code against sophisticated switching defenses. And when those 5 teams brought Yang Hansen in for his secret workouts, they saw the exact same DNA. It wasn't just a fleeting resemblance, it was a mirror image of the archetype they were all desperately searching for. Hansen himself stated that Jokic was the player he modeled his game after, and it showed in every possession. In the drills, he wasn't just scoring in the post, he was threading bounce passes through impossibly tight windows to cutters. He directed traffic like a seasoned veteran, pointing out defensive rotations and putting his teammates in the perfect position to score. His court vision was described as exceptional, a natural gift that allowed him to see plays developing 2 steps ahead of the defense. Scouts saw the same uncanny ability to read the floor, the same patient and unselfish approach that made Jokic and Şengün so effective. The comparisons were immediate and undeniable. Fans began calling him the Chinese Jokic, and while that label brings immense pressure, it was exactly what front offices were thinking. They weren't just drafting a 7'1" center from China. They were drafting a potential offensive engine, a player who fit the most valuable and game-changing blueprint in the modern NBA. The high pick wasn't a gamble on an unknown quantity. It was a calculated investment in a proven formula for success. But the offensive potential was only half of the equation. What these teams were discovering about his defensive game was, in its own way, just as shocking. Part 2. The Jokic 2.0 offensive blueprint was tantalizing enough to make any GM dream, but it was only half of the story. For every scout mesmerized by Hansen's passing, there was a skeptic pointing to the same glaring flaw in his scouting report: his defense. On paper, he was the classic liability, a slow-footed traditional 7-footer who would surely get cooked by the lightning-quick guards and versatile forwards of the modern NBA. His wingspan, while decent at 7'3", wasn't in the same freakish category as players like Rudy Gobert. The consensus was that he would be a target in the pick and roll, a defensive anchor who couldn't leave the paint. It was a legitimate concern, and for months it was the primary reason he was projected to be a second-round pick. But what the public scouting reports missed was a quiet, dramatic transformation. In the months leading up to the draft, Hansen had dedicated himself to a grueling conditioning regimen. The once slightly doughy center had shed significant weight, replacing it with lean muscle. The once slow-footed prospect now looked visibly quicker, his lateral movement more fluid, his ability to change direction surprisingly sharp. The player who showed up for those secret workouts was not the same one from the year-old game tape. He was faster, leaner, and more explosive. The slow-footed label was already becoming obsolete, a ghost of a flaw that no longer existed. But the improved quickness wasn't even the most shocking discovery. The real secret weapon was something he was born with. During the NBA Draft Combine, officials took his measurements, and one number left them speechless. Yang Hansen's hands were colossal. With a length comparable to Shaquille O'Neal's, his hands were officially measured as being larger than those of Kawhi Leonard. The 2-time Defensive Player of the Year famously nicknamed the Claw for his legendary mitts. This wasn't just a fun fact, it was a game-changing revelation. In basketball, massive hands are a superpower. They allow a player to palm the ball with ease, snatch rebounds out of the air amidst a crowd of opponents, and rip the ball away from unsuspecting ball handlers. For a defender, they are instruments of chaos, turning routine passes into deflections and easy layups into swatted shots. Suddenly, Hansen's defensive profile looked entirely different. He wasn't just a big body clogging the paint, he was a potential defensive menace with the physical tools to disrupt everything around him. His size, combined with his newfound quickness and these enormous hands, gave him the potential to be a true defensive anchor. A Blazers writer who witnessed his private workout confirmed this, later writing, quote, "Coaches and scouts rave about his work ethic. His defensive discipline, lateral quickness, and ability to stay in position already match the traits Portland covets." The once glaring weakness had transformed into a hidden strength. Teams weren't just drafting an offensive hub, they were looking at a player who could potentially anchor their defense for the next decade. The offensive comparisons to Jokic got him on the radar, but it was this hidden defensive upside that made him a complete package, a prospect too valuable to let slip away. The secret workouts, the Jokic 2.0 whispers, the shocking defensive measurements, all of these were crucial pieces of the puzzle. But every fire starts with a single spark. For Yang Hansen, that spark ignited a full year before the draft, on an international stage where there was nowhere to hide. It was the 2023 FIBA U19 World Cup, a tournament where the best young players on the planet collide, and it was the moment the first domino in his improbable rise began to fall. For years, NBA scouts had applied a heavy discount to any prospect coming out of the Chinese Basketball Association. The league was notorious for producing players with inflated stats who couldn't handle the speed and physicality of the NBA. Hansen, despite his accolades in the CBA, was viewed through that same skeptical lens. He was just another big fish in a small pond. Then, China was scheduled to play France, a team loaded with future pros. At the center of that French team was a player widely considered the gold standard for a modern big man prospect, Alex Sarr. A 7'1" athletic marvel with a 7'5" wingspan, Sarr was a defensive monster, a fluid rim runner, and the consensus number 2 pick in his draft class. He was everything Hansen wasn't supposed to be: explosive, agile, and proven against elite competition. This matchup was the ultimate litmus test. It wasn't about whether Hansen could dominate, it was about whether he could even survive against a player of Sarr's caliber. He did more than survive. He thrived. From the opening tip, Hansen didn't just hold his own. In many moments, he outplayed his more celebrated counterpart. While Sarr relied on raw athleticism, Hansen countered with sheer basketball genius. He used brilliant footwork and clever fakes to score in the post, turning Sarr's aggression against him. When the French defense collapsed on him, he showcased his elite vision, firing perfect passes to open cutters for easy baskets. Defensively, he was a rock, using his massive frame and impeccable timing to alter shots at the rim. He wasn't just competing, he was dictating the terms of the engagement. While China ultimately lost the game, the individual battle was a revelation. Hansen finished the tournament leading all players in blocks, finishing 4th in assists and 3rd in rebounds, a statistical trifecta that screamed versatility. For the handful of high-level NBA scouts in attendance, this was the aha moment. This wasn't a fluke. This wasn't a product of weak competition. This was a player with legitimate, translatable NBA skills holding his own against one of the best prospects in the world. The performance shattered the CBA stigma. It proved that his basketball IQ, his court vision, and his defensive instincts were real. While the game didn't make headlines for the general public, it sent a shockwave through the scouting community. The secret was out, at least to those who were paying close attention. Yang Hansen was no longer just an interesting name to file away. He was now a legitimate threat, a priority target whose stock had just begun its meteoric rise. He was now a legitimate threat, a priority target whose stock had just begun its meteoric rise. So we have all the pieces: a secret bidding war, a revolutionary player archetype, and a hidden defensive weapon. But they still don't answer the biggest question of all. Why would the Portland Trail Blazers, a team in the middle of a rebuild, risk their most valuable asset, a mid-first round pick, on such an unconventional player? The answer has less to do with what happens on the court and everything to do with a multi-billion-dollar transaction happening in the boardroom. The real motive wasn't just about building a team, it was about selling one. On May 13, 2025, just weeks before the NBA draft, the Paul Allen estate made the long-awaited announcement. The Portland Trail Blazers were officially for sale. In the modern sports landscape, this is the equivalent of finding a gold mine. NBA franchises have seen their valuations explode into the stratosphere. The Phoenix Suns sold for $4 billion. The Dallas Mavericks for $3.8 billion. Even minority stakes in teams like the Boston Celtics valued the franchise at over $6 billion. The estate knew this was the perfect time to cash in, and they needed a way to maximize their return. What's the fastest way to increase the value of your franchise right before a sale? Draft a player who brings an entire country of 1.4 billion basketball-obsessed fans with him. The selection of Yang Hansen wasn't just a basketball decision, it was a calculated financial asset acquisition. The proof is in the numbers. His very first Summer League game, a meaningless exhibition in July, drew an estimated 5.2 million viewers in China alone. That's more than most nationally televised NBA playoff games. Imagine the revenue from broadcast rights, merchandise sales, and sponsorship deals if Hansen becomes even a solid starting center. By drafting him, the Paul Allen estate likely added hundreds of millions of dollars to the team's final sale price overnight. He was a walking, breathing stimulus package for the franchise. The 16th pick wasn't a gamble on a player. It was an investment in a market, a move designed to make the incoming billionaire owner feel like they got a bargain. But even if the pick was a financial masterstroke, it created an immediate and glaring basketball problem that left fans and analysts scratching their heads. The question wasn't just why they drafted a player from China so early, it was why they drafted another center. Just 1 year prior, the Blazers had used a lottery pick on Donovan Clingan, a rugged, defensive-minded big man they had anointed as the center of their future. Now they had two. The move sparked immediate confusion and concern. Did the front office already lose faith in Clingan? Was this the beginning of a messy position battle before either had played a meaningful NBA minute? Very few believed the two could play together. In today's pace and space league, a Twin Towers lineup featuring two traditional 7-footers is seen as archaic and clunky. However, the front office saw a different possibility, one modeled after the Minnesota Timberwolves' successful experiment with Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert. The key is that while both are centers, they are fundamentally different players. Clingan is the defensive anchor, the rim protector, the physical force. Yang, with his exceptional passing and surprisingly great handles, is the offensive hub, the versatile playmaker. The Blazers' hope is that their opposing skill sets will create a dynamic, unpredictable frontcourt, similar to how the Towns-Gobert pairing propelled the Wolves to their deepest playoff run in 2 decades. More importantly, however, this strategy is the ultimate insurance policy. Drafting and developing big men is the riskiest proposition in the NBA. They are more susceptible to career-altering injuries, and their development curve is often steep. By selecting two highly touted but stylistically different centers in back-to-back drafts, the Blazers effectively doubled their chances of hitting a home run. If Clingan's development stalls or he struggles with injuries, they have Yang. If Yang can't adapt to the NBA's physicality, they have Clingan. It's a high-stakes hedge, a brilliant piece of risk management designed to ensure that no matter what happens, the franchise will have a cornerstone center for the next decade. As one Blazers executive told a reporter, "We feel like Yang is going to be really good for us, and probably sooner than most expect." It was a move made with both the present and the future in mind, securing a vital asset for whoever signs the checks next. And so the story of Yang Hansen is far more than just a basketball journey. It's a saga of secret workouts, a high-stakes financial gamble by a franchise up for sale, and a roster-bending move that has the whole league watching. He's a player with the blueprint of a Nikola Jokic, hidden defensive tools that shocked scouts, and the marketability of a global phenomenon. His rise from a projected second-rounder to a draft night bombshell was fueled by a perfect storm of on-court potential and off-court economics, making his selection one of the most fascinating and complex in recent memory. But it all leads to one final, captivating question. Can he live up to the chaos he's created? Is he the franchise cornerstone destined to make Portland's incredible gamble pay off? Or is he simply the most valuable asset in a multi-billion-dollar business transaction? Now, I want to hear from you. What are your predictions for Yang Hansen? Do you truly believe he can be a core piece of this franchise for the foreseeable future? Or will he become one of many international prospects to flame out of the league quickly? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories shaping the NBA. As always, I'll see you next time. Peace.